What's up, Danny?
Hey guys.
Hi, Danny.
We are back with our fourth quarantine episode of Beer Time with Books. It is now 2 with Sing 'em Buried Sing. This is our second with Rabbit Run. This is our new normal, guys.
For the foreseeable future, we're just going to be quarantine podding.
Yeah. There's no end to the tunnel quite yet.
It's a good skill to have if we ever get to separate cities. The wish to go on eternally
How dare you?
will be fulfilled. Also, it'll be good to get this skill down pat. I think these episodes have been pretty solid because we have a guest coming in for the next episode. So we'll have 4 on the pod again. That'll be the 3rd time we've had 4 people on the podcast. So that's pretty exciting. As is tradition, we're not going to name any names until it happens. But we're looking forward to that. And yeah, we are back with the second half of Rabbit Run. This is one that I feel like this is the least amount that we've talked about this book. Like, Jamie, I haven't talked to you that much. Danny, all of these conversations have only happened today. So this is some pretty fresh content right here.
Yeah, the only thing that I said to Jamie when I found out whatever day she hadn't finished it yet, I just said, "You're gonna die." That's all I said to her about the second half.
You just said you had feelings also at some point. You asked me if I had finished.
Yeah, I also finished this like abnormally early. I normally don't finish books, finish the second half of the book so close. But I think I finished this the weekend after we recorded last. And
I saw it on Goodreads. I saw you flying.
I mean, I didn't really even mean to, but I was like, I was like, all right, I'm committed. I want to know what's going on.
Well, let's knock through these classic corners so we can get to this discussion. I really want to know what you guys think after getting through this, because I think it took me by surprise, and I'm going to be curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are. But let's start with, what are you drinking? I haven't started in a bit, so I'll throw this off. We all have some fresh beers today. We got some fresh beers going on. Danny, this is like, we heard more about you being excited about your beer than we did about your thoughts on the book. So
yeah, I was really excited about my beer. It's cute. You guys, if you check out our Instagram, you'll see a pic.
Yeah, we'll have pics of the cans. Yeah, Beer Time.
At Beer Time with Books.
At Beer Time with Books.
You're screwing up the plug.
For my beer, I have New Belgium. This is the Voodoo Ranger series. I think this is just their classic IPA. I think they have multiple kinds of IPAs from Voodoo Ranger, but this is the OG. It's got kind of a darker taste to it. I'm digging it quite a bit. But yeah, this is the first one, I think, of maybe any of the Voodoo Rangers. Maybe we had one in a variety pack before, but yeah, it's definitely a bit of a darker taste. I wish I knew more about how to explain beer taste.
Heavier?
By like episode 22 of our podcast. But yeah, a little bit heavier and a little bit like caramely, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. This is Jamie. Hi. I'm drinking a Logboat Brewing Co. Snapper American IPA, which I'm not sure if we've had on the pod before, but Brian and I both really, really love Snapper. Logboat is in Columbia, Missouri, where we went to college, so it brings back fond memories. And it's a great IPA. It's got subtle hints of a lot of fruits, as Brian likes to point out.
Many fruits in this thing.
Pineapple, peach, and melon, it says on the can. But it's a great IPA.
Only in Missouri.
So good.
Hey guys, this is Danny. I'm drinking a sour I was really excited about. It's called Wild Little Thing by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, I assume. It just says, Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. It's a slightly sour ale with hints of guava, hibiscus, and strawberry. And I honestly just really loved the can. It's bright pink with bright yellow polka dots, and I thought it was real cute. So...
we've been susceptible. I posted on our Instagram the can I was talking about. Yeah, Sippin' Pretty.
Sippin' Pretty. I want so a print of Sippin' Pretty.
Honestly though, it's
so pretty.
It would be worth it. So yeah, we have, like we said, this will be up on the Instagram, and then also we're going to get into a quick highlight of some recent media we've been consuming. So I'll just hit a quick movie corner. I've been trying to catch up on some movies this year, and I knocked some big ones off my list that I was excited about 2 weekends ago. Hit some 90s classics with Pulp Fiction and The Big Lebowski. So it was just kind of a 90s block, which was pretty interesting, and watching one of Tarantino's or his most famous film after I've seen a bunch of others was kind of also an interesting order, just because that's the one most people talk about, and I didn't get to watch it until I've already seen most of his work already. And then also one of the movies we watched I specifically tied back into our book this week. Over the weekend we watched High Fidelity, and I told Jamie halfway through, I was like, because she kept making faces because the main character makes some questionable choices and has some questionable opinions. And she was just like, all right, I said, do you like this movie? And she said, I don't know. It depends on if we're supposed to think this guy is an asshole. And I was like, and we started comparing it to Rabbit Run. It was like, yeah, that's what we thought about the book. It was like, maybe the book is good depending on if we're supposed to think that Rabbit is an asshole. So anyway, it was kind of an interesting tie-in to watch that. That movie had a bit of a lighter ending than this one, which I think was added to some disappointment. But overall, I enjoyed the movie. So those are my quick ones, quick movie corner.
Nice. I was really proud of myself this time around because since our last podcast episode, I have finished 2 books.
Whoa.
Not related to the podcast. I'm so proud of that. They were both audiobooks, so maybe that lessens the effect here. But the first one that I finished was called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Which came out like in 2017, I think, and was on Reese Witherspoon's book club list, I'm pretty sure, so it was pretty popular.
That book club book list is popping.
It is. And honestly, I didn't expect to like it. I downloaded it because it was kind of a shorter audiobook, and had heard people talk about it, but I was like, it's probably going to be kind of dumb and quick. But I really enjoyed it, genuinely. The first few chapters I thought were slow, and I didn't think that I liked the main character. But it really built in, like, I grew to love her so much, and it was much darker than I thought it would be for kind of like a popular, girly book. I don't know how to describe that, but like it was a very dark story and very sad, and I almost cried at one point. And I really enjoyed it. I recommend it. And then the other one that I just finished today, is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, which the audiobook was narrated by Neil Gaiman, which I thought was really cool to hear how he wanted to tell it. And I downloaded that mostly because just recently Brian and I were talking about how Neil Gaiman is such like a recognizable name, but neither of us even knew if we had read anything by him. And then we both realized the only book that we had read by him was Coraline in the 6th grade.
Which got read to us by a teacher. So. Yeah.
And we have that shared history. So I was like, I should listen to another one. And that one is pretty short. And it was good. I enjoyed it. It really was not what I expected. But it's a fun little fantasy kind of story if you like that. That's about it.
Nice. Danny?
I've been going pretty TV hard recently.
Movies, books, TV, we got it.
Yeah,
we're covering it all. I mean, the most recent book that I finished was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and I liked it. He's also a poet, and honestly, I think I was expecting a little bit more of the book to be a little more poetic. It's a memoir, like kind of written in the style of a letter to his mother, and it's really beautiful. It's about his life as an immigrant, and anyway, it's good. I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to, but it also made me want to read more of his stuff. But Will and I also finished The Crown, and
boom, it's been on the docket for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we needed like space in between the episodes because they're just so heavy, but it took us quite a while to get used to the I mean, I'm not used to the new actors. I don't like it. I hate it. have to get over it. But it's fine. It just feels like a new show to me. But we loved it. We loved the ending of the third season regardless. And I also watched the entire second and third season of Ozark since the last podcast.
Oh, damn.
And I had forgotten if I had even finished the first season, and I had, but I ended up watching the last few episodes, and then I just burned through both the latter 2 seasons. They were just it's like a pretty fast like Breaking Bad type show, so it just I kind of just like zoomed by like 3 or 4 episodes in like, you know, each weekend evening, and you're pretty much done. So Will he watched parts of it with me, but it was a little too dark. He wasn't as interested. But I mean, I liked it. I pretty much agree with everybody's assessment that the second season was kind of meh and the third season was great. So
yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about the third season. I could be into it. I've just heard good things.
I'm curious about it, but then I hear so many mixed reviews about like you said, like the second season, a lot of people drop off, I think. So
yeah, I feel like with like money laundering shows, like pretty much you get to a point where like by season 3 everyone's just like, oh, I promise I won't do that, I give you my word. And it's just like, okay, we're done trusting people. So I don't know why we're still trusting people at this point, 5 years into the laundering. But anyway, it's appropriately intense. I gasped aloud at many a scene, many a moment. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Cool. Well, hit the 3 mediums there. Got some books, got some TV, got some movies. So with that, we are now moving into our discussion for the second half of Rabbit Run. So we're gonna toss it over to Danny because this was her choice for a little bit of a summary of all of this shit that went on in this second half.
All right, we didn't really leave off at like a super notable point.
No, not really.
But essentially, in the second half, where were we? Like 123. In the second half, Rabbit ends up going back to his wife upon learning that she is basically in labor. I think.
Yeah.
He like gets a call in the middle of the night. He's in Ruth's bed, and he goes back to like that evening. He goes to the hospital. We also have learned that he pretty much has been staying with Ruth for like for the duration of for the rest of his wife's pregnancy.
Which at that point was like multiple months. So.
Yeah. So
it had been at least 2 months, I think.
Yeah.
It was like several months, and from the tone, I thought this was, I don't know, maybe I'm just inferring this, but from the tone, it sounded a little bit like they had pretty much fallen into like a similarly kind of like married-esque boring routine, and like I was just like expecting something terrible to happen anyway, because like he like only chases things that are exciting and gets burned out very quickly, and so like it was only like a matter of time that he was like going to leave Ruth anyway, in my opinion. Anyway, he leaves Ruth, goes to Janice. She has the baby named Rebecca June. And there's a point where after I think I read in a summary somewhere, like they're together for like 9 days between like her coming home from the hospital and him, spoiler, leaving again. And
they should know by now. Everybody's reading through.
I mean, right, but I mean, he does leave again.
Right.
And there's this one night. I think it's just like a few nights after they come home from the hospital, and he basically like during the day has been like Janice has just been like exhausted with the baby, and she's feeling like a bad mom, and she's feeling a lot of it. Even I don't even think it's told from her point of view, and you can absolutely tell that she is just like having a shit time. And Rabbit is like riding this weird high of like his wife just having had a baby, and basically like he feels very fertile because the baby has come, and he's also just like come from Ruth's, like, you know, like a week and a half ago, and he's just like riding very high and feeling very satisfied with himself. And so
as if he was such a great thing that he came back to his own child also.
Right.
But yeah, also
he
the
feels
rest
very righteous.
Yeah, I'm just
he
like, I did the right
morning.
thing after like,
Yeah.
no, this was the thing.
He's very self-congratulatory. He's very like impressed with himself that he has done this noble thing. And also there are times like in between being at the hospital and coming home where he just like waxes poetic about like how excited he is to have had this baby, but like it's clear that this baby is like a sign of his own fertility. Like he's excited about it because he's like, look at this thing that I made. I did this
from my seed.
From
really,
my
though.
seed. Literally. And so he there are several like paragraphs interspersed in that time where he is just like so very proud. Like he's almost like bursting with joy about this baby, but like it's not because he's so happy that the baby exists. He's just happy to like have produced this baby from his own fertility. So he spends this one day kind of like basically getting Janice drunk and taking advantage of her alcoholism or alleged alcoholism, and just kind of keeps serving her drinks like into the evening. And like once she's good and drunk, he decides he wants to like try to have sex with her and brings it up. And she is like, no, I just had a baby. Everything is terrible and I'm in a lot of pain. Meanwhile, like you hear all about her, like the pain she's in, and he is like on the other side, like he's very turned on by like her like postpartum body and situation, and he like wants to like he wants to bone her this evening. And when she says no, he basically just like gets up and leaves and goes to Ruth's. I read a summary where it said that he had like decided he was leaving again for Ruth's, like for good. And I didn't actually get that from that one.
I didn't really either. It didn't feel like it, but also
I mean, anything can happen. Like, who knows?
And we were also getting it from Janice's perspective, and that like heightened that a little bit because, like, I mean, very much rightly so. You know, he had left in a similar manner to previously, so she had maybe assumed, but not from his, but not from his own actions. That I assume that was his intention, but definitely from everyone else's perspective, it made sense.
But also, maybe it's always his intention to leave forever. So
yeah,
like.
I mean, he's not. Yeah, it's always just like I didn't know if he like a few summaries I read implied that he had decided to go back to Ruth's indefinitely. I thought maybe he was just going there for the night. I don't know. But it definitely, like, Janice definitely was thinking that. There was even a point where he starts doing, I can't remember what he was doing, but he starts doing something in bed with her, and she just says, like, did you learn that from your whore? Or, like, did your whore teach you that?
Yeah, it was the butt stuff.
He tries to, like, masturbate on like, her butt.
Onto her, yeah. And it was also just, like, it was again like yet another just like vaguely like rapey scene of him like getting his wife drunk, and then when she says no, he like he's doing plenty anyway. So he leaves. He goes to Ruth's. She's not there, and where does he go? No, I can't remember. Where does he go
when she's not there? He goes to a hotel.
He wanders. He goes to like drugstores and stuff. Yeah.
And eventually he gets a hotel room out there in Brewer.
Oh, yeah. So then he finds out that Ruth is pregnant because he didn't know, right?
That happens later.
Yeah, way
That's
later.
at the end of the book.
Yeah.
What am I?
So while he's
Ruth
gone,
wasn't at her apartment.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. I forgot that
this
he
is
has a
the Janice scene when he doesn't come home the next morning and.
Yeah, and Janice.
Yeah,
gets really
sorry.
drunk.
That was later. So Janice, the next morning, we are finally hearing from Janice's perspective, and she's like in a drunken stupor, and it's like probably some of the most like tense few pages of like any book that I've ever.
Crazy.
Very anxiety inducing.
Well, especially because like getting to that point when you're reading it and like each successive drink that she then begins to take, you're like, it's not fully coming together. Where like I think the one thing Jamie and I said, it's like neither of us were predicting the end result, but like it just made sense up to that point. But that whole scene of just like it spiraling was just like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah,
right now?
Once it got to that point, though, because I didn't know what was going to happen, but I kept being like, wait, she mentioned the baby like 3 paragraphs ago. Where is the baby?
Yeah, that's I think it was very concerning. He did a really, really good job of describing this scene. Like I could picture everything that was happening in their their small little place where they live. Like she was going from room to room in just like this drunken stupor, and like every like 4 paragraphs she mentions the baby. But it's really stressful because like because the most stressful part is then she decides to give the baby a bath, and it's this whole, because I think it was dirty.
Well, her mom called and was like, "I'm coming over," and
her mom called, and the
baby had like spit up on itself or something.
Pooped,
and she was really stressed. She was really stressed about her mom coming over because the house was messy and Rabbit had left again, and there's this whole like stupid there's this whole stupid pressure that like she's the reason that like Rabbit left in the first place. So she already is like very vulnerable. Also, she just had a baby 9 days ago. So like she's very fragile. And anyway, she like puts the baby down, picks it up in like a series in like just various paragraphs, and she decides to give it a bath, and then it drowns. It felt a little bit sudden. There was a lot of lead up, but it was just kind of like I almost had to read the paragraph the sentence a few times just to like make sure that I like understood exactly what had happened. But she puts the baby in the really deep bath water, and it sinks to the bottom, and she is like very drunk and like has been talking about the several drinks she's been making herself, and the baby isn't breathing. And by the time her mom gets there, the baby has died. And I think that was one of the only parts in the book that there was actually, like, for me, in my edition, there was actually like an end to like any kind of what felt like a section or like a chapter, which was like very fitting. But Rabbit is gone, and he doesn't find out until he calls the pastor to ask him basically like, how should I come home? Like, or how help me, basically 2.0, what do I do? And Eccles is like, oh, like you haven't heard, and he has to tell him. And then he spirals and goes into this like, one of his like swings of feeling terrible and sorry for himself. And essentially like there's before the main end of the book, there's a section where Eccles' wife like invites him in for like some like they pass each other or see each other like in town, and she invites him in, and he thinks that she wants to have sex with him, and then like gets enraged when that's not what she was asking. And it's just like, I don't know, just like yet another example of him just like this is like so many things have happened to him in his like in this span of this book, and like I don't know, like this is the thing that he's like thinking about, is her just like thinking that she wants to have sex with him. So during the baby's funeral, he has this kind of like panic moment where he basically just like tells everybody that it's Janice's fault and that it's not his fault. He has this like very cringy freak out moment. I don't know if you guys were cringy during that part, but I was.
It's upsetting. Yeah.
It's very upsetting. And he runs away. He literally runs away. from the funeral. And he finds out that he goes on to find out Ruth is pregnant.
Mm-hmm. That's when he goes to Ruth's apartment and finds out she's pregnant. And then he runs away again.
And then, he runs away from the funeral. He runs to Ruth's, finds out she's pregnant. And she basically says, like, we could get married, kind of. And then he runs away again. And that's how the book ends.
So, where do we start?
I don't know. I kind of want to start with where we ended the last episode, which is just basically like, I mean, do you think that we're supposed to, do you think he's ultimately like a sympathetic character? Do you think we're supposed to know he's an asshole? Like, are we supposed to feel bad for him? Does he represent like this wanderlusty, like, search for a higher meaning? Or is he just a dick?
I'm still struggling with this question because I think that I find it very hard to believe that anybody could read this book and not think that he's an asshole and that he ruined his own life and everything's terrible because of how much of an asshole he is. But and I think that Updike, at the end of this, I think Updike thinks that Rabbit is flawed. I do think that that is true, but
Agreed.
I am not sure that he thinks he's as flawed as I think he is.
Also agreed.
Like, I feel like there's just still moments of, like, you kind of want to be him, maybe. Like, there's still just weird comments of, like, reliving the glory days and feeling very strong and capable and all these things that, like, just push it a little bit over my limit. And I don't know how to describe that. I definitely can see, like, a narcissistic 20-year-old man reading this book and thinking that Rabbit is the good guy. Like, in
if you consult Reddit with just Updike, you will find many a post that is just, like, mostly men, I would venture, being like, this book changed my life. It was absolutely it was a coming of age novel for me and myself. I really identify, like, it's very, but also I think that, like, you have to analyze it almost without, I don't know if you can. I don't think you can. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I felt again, like I did last episode, that the perspectives of other characters toward Rabbit were very scathing, especially in this second half.
Yeah.
That again made me feel more certain about it, which I don't know what that means about Updike overall, that was still up in the air, having read half of the book last time and not fully knowing that. Mm-hmm. But we get to the end of this section, or this half of the book, and, you know, especially Ruth, when we get to Ruth talking to Rabbit, the stuff that she says is so on the nose, and the way that she regards him and actually makes him feel what she is saying, where I think the main thing that kept sticking out to me is that, like, she was rejecting his touch and was, like, talking about how he carries this hate, and he's questioning if he's actually a monster. Like, I felt like a lot of that stuff didn't ever seem to fully break through to Rabbit until that end section with Ruth, because when he's talking to other characters, which this just solidifies that Rabbit, like, totally is an asshole, and I feel like this was written in that way that, like, Updike just has him, every time he talks to somebody, is going back and forth on, like, when things are going his way, he really likes the person. When he's not, they're ugly or an asshole or all these things. But
they're fat.
Yeah, right. But, like, with Ruth, I feel like there's finally this moment, even though he doesn't learn from it necessarily, because he's still like, well, I don't know that I'm leaving Janice, sorry. but like he's at least feeling something completely where he's like, am I a monster? Like something is wrong with me. And I feel like that wouldn't have been the last conversation that Rabbit has in the book if we were supposed to feel any other way, because like there's no other moment where he has that moment of being like, oh well, like Ruth still sucks. It's just kind of like, oh well, I don't know, let's get married. Like he's either feeling bad about himself or like, let's make this right, like let's get married and all this stuff. So I think that like in that point, yeah, like I think Rabbit was supposed to be written as a flawed character. I don't know that necessarily all of the problems that we had with Rabbit are all of the problems that maybe John Updike had with Rabbit. And so that's the big issue here for me, is that like there's a lot of his actions that maybe were supposed to be some sort of commentary on the time period that he's living in and like the people that he's interacting with, that is like, oh, you know, I got the feeling that this was supposed to be something that was like, look, isn't this like a crazy new idea, like going against the grain of mid 20th century America? And it's just kind of like, yeah, but reading it from right now is just kind of like, oh, this is still not awesome. Like the stuff that Rabbit is doing, the way he's talking about people, the way he is, you know, the way he's really acting out on a lot of his impulses is not great. But I think there were still parts to him that were sympathetic because of certain ideas that were addressed, but overall his treatment of most people in this book was absolutely appalling, and Rabbit is definitely a shitty character. So that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know that I have fully come to a conclusion, honestly. I think it's interesting what you said about like the parts where we have insight into Ruth and how she's feeling. Like some parts of it, like I was reading and I was like I was so into it, and I was like, yes, Updike at the very least is like self-aware. Like he is able to write Ruth very convincingly. But like there's like 20% of me that is like, Updike is writing Ruth as like an angry feminist caricature. And it's like a satire almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like he's writing Ruth as not somebody who he doesn't believe those ideas. He's just or he's not even aware that those are valid. They're just like, it's just like a caricature of like an angry, like an angry liberal feminist or something.
That's a little bit how I read that last scene too. And like I just looked back at it while Brian was talking, because I was like, I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I was putting this in there because I feel like I just don't like Updike already. But I feel like even in that last scene there was this tiny hint of Ruth like still wanting Rabbit in a small way. Like she hates him. Well,
because she had that concession to even like considering marrying him in the first place.
Yeah, like she's furious, but she still is kind of like, but maybe if you say you will do it. And that tiny sliver of her is what's upsetting to me from Updike's perspective of like, no, he doesn't deserve shit from her.
But I also feel like it was in a more challenging tone than that, even though it is like an issue that she's even offering it up. I don't think that it was kind of like giggly, like, well, if you like,
no, I think it's more like she's
Janice,
like
it's just
sobbing.
like, no, if you get rid of Janice, then yeah, let's make it work. But like, I feel like she even had an understanding of like, but you won't do that, like, because she said that multiple times.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times have you said you're gonna leave your wife, and then like, what position does that put me in? Because then I'm the wife and you may leave me. But regardless, as far as his writing of other characters, like when we're talking about Janice, that's another example of that I was like, this isn't written like in quite the way that it should from a perspective of somebody that was so like wronged here by somebody. That like Janice, we got her perspective and it did create some sympathy for her, but there was enough that it was just like making Janice into like just kind of a bumbling fool to some degree, when like I don't even know that was necessarily warranted either, unless it was just for the overall effect of like her being bumbling enough to accidentally drown her own kid.
Yeah, that's what I feel like, as with both of them, but especially with Ruth right there at the end. Like she has there is a part of her that she's very genuinely upset that Rabbit she knows he's not coming back. Like, she knows that, and she's crying about it, and she is upset. But, like, she has absolutely no reason to be in love with him. Like, everything we've seen from their relationship, she has no reason to actually feel that way. And that's the sliver that, like, pisses me off.
Yeah,
well, for both of them, Janice and Ruth, it doesn't make sense that either
Janice,
of them
I feel like
care.
Janice was so young when they got together that's a little bit more
sure,
believable.
And they have a kid and everything, but like there was too much forgiveness just to be like, it's fine, like if we can just get past the things that you did, but like the things that he did were fucking awful.
It feels like that's where the self-awareness stops a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
It's just like you're just hoping that like people will absolutely just like forget everything and be fools and just continue to forgive you, and you won't be like you won't have to answer for anything that you've done. But I think, I don't know. I can't. Whenever I was reading Ruth, every time, especially even in the first half, when I was reading that one part, I was like, yes, girl, like this, you are. She was like being very critical of men and of Rabbit, and they like down to like talking about like how pathetic his penis is. Like, like he was very, very like emasculating.
Jamie's just next to me, hand on her hip, nodding aggressively. Yes,
girl. Yeah.
I mean, that's how I was feeling. But then about 3/4 of the way in, I caught myself, and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, this. It feels like I am the exact person who is being pandered to, almost. And
it's we are not the core demographic for this novel.
No, and it also reminds me of like somebody who is like making a mockery of like a 20-something like liberal female feminist, like kind of. And so anyway, so I don't know. I can't really get that out of my head. So I don't fully know. I don't know how I fully feel about it. But what? Yeah, Jamie.
In relation to that, I don't know. You can interrupt me if this is going to the side. But I also felt like in the first half, a little bit, Eccles was supposed to be like the foil character for us, who was like, I'm a man too, and I'm gonna lead you in the right way. But then even at the end, Eccles, when Rabbit has done all this bullshit, Eccles' wife is like, how can you still fight for that man? And Eccles goes, I love him.
Yeah. Even Eccles admits to loving him and also continuing to just blindly think that he's a good person. And I want to that's a good segue, because I wanted to bring up what role like Christianity played, because it feels like sometimes he's being very satirical and critical of Christianity, but it also sometimes feels like it's actually like it's very blindly genuine. And so I don't know. I feel like Eccles is an interesting is an interesting character to represent Christianity in this way, because there are layers to him continuing to believe in and forgive Rabbit.
Mm-hmm. I think that the thing with religion in this, because I'm so on the fence. I think that when I was reading it as critical of religion, because like Eccles sucks. He admits he doesn't have any beliefs. Like he is a shitty husband, whatever. But also, I think that the way that Updike writes Eccles' wife is incredibly, like, hateful. Like, I think she is portrayed as a hateful character, but I like her. Oh,
I thought she was written as the most firm of any of the women in the book, because she's totally past, like, Rabbit's bullshit up.
Yeah, but
because even at the end of like,
I think Updike describes her. I agree with her actions.
I always think that like a very powerful thing is the last impression you get of somebody in a book, and her last impression is just like him calling up, regardless of whether or not Eccles is actually there. She just hangs up the phone and is like, "Fuck off!" Like, I cannot believe after all of this, you give a call. You have the gall to call here.
I just worry
get the fuck out of here.
I worry that people like other readers would interpret her as just like a bitchy flirt because she doesn't tell Eccles about the butt slap, and then she supposedly winks at Rabbit. Like, those are the things.
But she shuts the door on him when he suggests, even. Like, I don't know. That's a complicated thing for me.
Yeah,
but that's getting past the religion thing anyway.
I see both of those things. I feel like she's not, like, she's kind of portrayed as like a manipulative, like, shrew a little bit. You know what I mean?
That's how I think Updike is writing her.
And but also, like, I mean, I had to take that with a grain of salt a little bit, just because, I mean, again, here I am, like, trying to separate Updike from Rabbit and Rabbit from Updike, but, like, it feels like it's a very classic, like, Rabbit hates her because she won't sleep with him. Like, that's a very, like, his attitude toward her, even though it doesn't even make any sense. Like, she's married with kids, and he has a sex worker on the side and a baby on the way and a wife and a whatever. And, like, there's so many, and he still hates her for not sleeping with him. And even, like, at the end, there's so many things going on, and it was, like, a very, like, she asks him in for something, and he literally interpreted it as though you would, like, a porno, and, like, with, like, for some lemonade, and, like, he essentially, like, comes in and is like, let's bone, and she's like, what the fuck? Are you insane?
Yeah.
Like, and so I don't know. We've veered from the religion topic, but I agree with you, Jamie.
Yeah, I'll bring something up for the religious factor on, like, if it's actually, like, being that critical of it for a couple points. But one of the things I do want to bring up quickly, just because of something you said, Danny, was the quickest quote, and I want to try to vet it, but it was on Wikipedia, full disclosure here. But one of the things that Updike was quoted with was saying that this was his response to On the Road, and I'll paraphrase what I had read here, that his response to On the Road of, like, this is what happens to everybody at home when you up and leave. Like, this was supposed to be a thing of being, like, On the Road at this time was this novel that everybody references, and it's like this glamorous lifestyle of, like, just get up and leave and nothing matters, like, you're gonna fulfill your purpose in life. But, like, he had specifically said, and again, I tried to follow the actual cited pieces to find this quote out of Wikipedia, but it led to some general Penguin's Classic page. But he did say it was a response on what happens when you leave to everyone else at home. So that is kind of an interesting point for that. And then for the religious part of it, a couple of things. One of them is more humorous and one of them is more serious about if religion is getting criticized here. A huge moment was with Eccles when he goes to the Protestant minister for the Engstrom family and gets totally dressed down of, like, what are you doing? This is not the job given to you by Jesus Christ our Lord. This is a job given to you because you think that, like, you have some ability to do something here that is so outside of your expertise. This isn't something that we do as ambassadors for God. This is not what our purpose is here. So that, to me, regardless of the rest of Eccles' stuff, I think that was something that was like, we're not supposed to read Eccles as this pinnacle of Christianity, because it even gets to the point, the quote that I'm remembering from what happened is when Rabbit is talking to Eccles and he's letting him know, Eccles is letting Rabbit know that his child has died, is that he says something along the lines of, like, I need to tell you about this terrible thing that happened to us. To us.
This terrible thing that has happened to us.
And then that was a break in the text where it gets onto a new section. So, like, that's critical of Eccles, that any of Eccles', like, ambassadorship for religion is, like, totally tossed to the side. And the fact that he is the most prominent religious figure in the book and gets that dressing down and has these selfish acts, I think was hugely telling. And then I think just the humorous thing that maybe is just, like, subtly implied, but, like, we're going through Rabbit's journey here, and Rabbit is, like, coming back and, like, getting more involved with this family, and the child is born. Then he goes to church, and when he goes there, it's not that he gets some message of salvation that is like, this is my turning point to be a better man. It just makes him horny, and he goes home to masturbate on his wife's ass.
Yeah, because that was the moment when Eccles' wife invited him over.
Right, and that to me was also another hugely telling point where we're getting to all of these like I think that the thing that was so crazy about this novel too, regardless of like how frustrating a lot of points were, it was such a buildup of so much tension that these climaxes happened so rapidly at the end here and in so many different places, because there were so many different storylines that were setting up, and like this religious piece here culminating in Rabbit going there like supposedly being a better man and then just getting horny was like such a telling thing to me, in my opinion, that like added to my thought that religion was getting like very much criticized, at least in the way that it was getting presented at this point in America.
I had a quote kind of about that.
I didn't love, but like I loved the church scene because just
insane.
listening to his narrating his own mind as he was in church was hysterical.
It was insane. The whole end of this book was insane.
But this quote is, I think, right after the baby dies, but before Rabbit knows. I'm pretty sure. But it says he had gone to church and brought back this little flame and had nowhere to put it on the dark, damp walls of the apartment, so it had flickered and gone out. And he realized that he wouldn't always be able to produce this flame. What held him back all day was the feeling that somewhere there was something better for him than listening to babies cry and cheating people in used car lots. And it's this feeling he tries to kill.
Oh my god.
Which is like, he's so shitty. But I think that's the thing about this book that is frustrating to me, is that I think John Updike is mostly being critical here, but I also think it's right on the edge of critical, to the point where people who feel that way, men who are just like, there's things better for me than crying babies. I think that they view him as sympathetic when he isn't.
Yes, I think that's why I have so many problems with so many reviews of this book. So many reviews focus on him being this, even like a review from Joyce Carol Oates. She like a woman is my point. Is that like so many people like praise this his character as being like this like suppressed, like, yearning for something more, and like that's fine, but like you don't have to do it this way. Like it doesn't have to be like this, and it shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
And just so many reviews like I feel like there are so many summaries and reviews that praise his ability to like write this very like this character who's yearning so much for so much, and like it just is like, did you forget the other 70% of the book where he's a terrible person? Like, I don't know. I feel like that matters, and I feel like you can't erase that part of the book.
Yeah.
I still agree with that, and like I said, the main part of holding back from the rest of it is absolutely his treatment of other people, his thoughts about other people. That's the biggest thing that is like, that makes Rabbit irredeemable to me, regardless of whatever lessons we're supposed to learn from his like journey, quote unquote journey here. But I will say, for like what they were talking about, there's a couple of essays that I had read about like what is Rabbit supposed to represent here, and one of the ideas that I found to be very interesting, especially because like obviously at this time period there's a lot of like problematic things anyway. This is pre-civil rights movement, this is pre like second wave feminism. This is pre like a lot of different things that would add to like the problematic factors that, you know, these ideas aren't mainstream. But the main thing that a lot of these essays were asserting is about like what is, you know, unfortunately a man's place. And this is not like this whole novel that's like trying to get the perspective or journey of like other people at this point in America, but like the man's journey in post-war America. And they were specifically talking about President Eisenhower and his like incessant focus on like the sense of self and the sense of purpose, that like everyone's purpose in World War II was for the greater good of the country, producing things for the country. And now it was past that, where it's like there's more to life than that. Like this is something to think about, all of you Americans, parentheses men out there. Like there's more to life than this like production and food production.
It's very Ayn Rand.
Yeah, for your people. It's like there's more to it than that. Like find yourself. This is the time to find yourself. And that rabbit is like, well, what does that mean for me as a person that like had such glory before, and that he had like almost found himself previously, as we continue to revisit his basketball days. Like that was his sense of self, is like, this is when I was at my greatest. And that he's like still trying to grapple with that on like a almost societal pressure to still find himself outside of like the things that had been determined, of like be with your family, help your country, produce for other people. Like there's more to life than that. He's like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then he ends up doing absolutely horrible stuff because I don't think he knows what it means.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't justify any part of his character, but like that's part of the like motivation behind what he does almost. But like,
do you think that by the end of this novel, and I know it's a series, there are 3 more and or 4 more novels, because I saw something.
It was like a novella,
like a short story or something.
Yeah.
Do you think that he learns anything by the end? Like, do you think in that regard of like?
No.
Okay.
Like I said, I think that we don't get far enough. As me saying, as I had said, talking about his conversation with Ruth previously, that like that's the first time that it really seems that anybody gets to him, aside from like maybe his fear of his own parents when they find out that his child is died, where he's like, what's my mom gonna say? Which that's a whole other can of worms to open up about those scenes. But
the moms and the mother-in-law situation.
Exactly.
Oh my god.
Exactly. But like the thing is like with Ruth, that's the first time that we really see somebody really break through to him in somewhat of a meaningful way. Not that he again learns from anything, because he still goes back to Janice.
Yeah.
He still goes back to Janice, and it doesn't.
Maybe.
That's what's presumed, that he was kind of saying like, I don't know that like that's something I can commit to. So regardless, I don't think we get enough past that to even see a growth from a moment that seemed to be a fundamental change of Rabbit's own internal thought process.
Yeah.
So in that regard, no, I think that maybe there's potential, and there's more books, as you said, so maybe that happens. But right now, no. Rabbit didn't learn a goddamn thing.
See, and that's what I feel like is upsetting to me from like a storytelling perspective from Updike. Like there are so many ways. And like, I don't know, maybe it's a good portrayal of like the person that we were told Janice is, and maybe that's true of her. But also like, because Janice accidentally drowns the baby when she's by herself and she is drunk, that gives Rabbit such a loophole to not learn a goddamn thing.
Yeah, and then he blames her at the funeral, like, as if he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
like,
and we could have easily gotten to a point where Rabbit did something terrible like that, like to that proportion. But it's not, it's led in a way that it's like, Janice is the bimbo, and you left her, so you kind of caused this, but like, she's the drunk, and she did it. Like, physically, she did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was almost like there were like 37 softballs lobbed at Updike in the way that he could have like ended this to like, help Rabbit learn anything, and he straight up didn't, which was probably intentional, but I don't know, that's frustrating because there were so many ways where like he could have taught Rabbit something. I also don't have a lot of I'm interested honestly in the next book. I really am interested in, I just want to know what the hell else there is to write about. And so I don't know. I read a review on Goodreads I was just like browsing reviews of this book, and somebody commented on like the rest of the books. Somebody asked a question about him, and somebody replied with just like, "Don't bother. They're all just it's exactly the same as the first book, except for with more drugs and more underage girls." And I was like, "Well,
tight.
Sounds great." Sounds great. Yeah, well, we should go into final thoughts. I mean, we could talk about this book for years, which I feel like we will.
This will be a touchstone moment of this podcast of just like fucking run. I want to ask. I mean, Brian, you briefly touched on reading a little bit about just like reading some like essays or reading other like related coverage of this book. I wondered if either of you had come across any like questionable like summaries. This is a leading question because I read a lot of summaries before this book, and I was curious what you guys thought, if you had like read any other summaries, because or even commentary on this book, because I read several summaries that framed the last big part where Janice drowns the baby, and the last part of the book. It frames that issue in like several different ways. I read several summaries that like, some of them like basically even like absolve Rabbit of all like fault. So there's like an erasure of history of what happened in this book. Like there was an essay question that I read that was just like, I don't know, from like SparkNotes or something, and it asks, discuss the presentation of women in this novel. Updike has been criticized for treating women as objects in his books, particularly Rabbit Run, and for privileging his male characters to the point of misogyny. How valid do you think this argument is? God damn it.
And then there was even like another summary that like even presents the ending as like Ruth. It almost makes it sound like Ruth is begging Rabbit to marry her. And it's like, okay, you could maybe read it that way in one sentence, but
I didn't.
One section.
But that's not what happens. And so what's interesting to me is like even the reframing of this book in like current like pop culture and like literature, like it, you know, I don't know. I found a lot of different like summaries of the book, and some of them definitely paint Rabbit as the hero, which is stressful to me. And it was very disappointing to read that. Like, this book is still possibly being taught to like English classes or read in English classes where like people are thinking that Rabbit like is maybe in the right, and that gave me a lot of anxiety. Anyway, those are pretty much my final thoughts.
I have read very few things because I finished the book today. So I read a few like Goodreads reviews, but those were very like recent and so maybe different. But I understand that perspective as an English teacher, because I know, like, I would absolutely never recommend this to students, because I know for a fact that half of my students would interpret it as Rabbit is the good guy. Because I've taught books that, like, I feel like in Of Mice and Men, I feel like obviously Curly's wife is a very sympathetic character, and Steinbeck has been stated saying that she is, but all of my, like, teenage boys think that she's a slut and a bitch. And I feel like this book is so much worse in that regard. Like, that's why I kept saying, like, it's so on the fence of, like, I think Updike is being critical, but I think it takes kind of a, like, nuanced perspective to understand that he's being critical. Because also, I was thinking at the end of this, when I was reading it, I could not describe to you right now. I read this whole book. I could not describe to you exactly what Rabbit looks like other than he's tall, but I could in detail tell you about Janice's boobs.
Yeah.
And that's really upsetting to me.
I could tell you all about Ruth's 5'7", 145-pound frame.
Yeah, like I understand people getting that perspective because like he definitely is misogynistic in a lot of ways. And I do think that he's trying to be critical and trying to be progressive in many parts of this book, but it's not quite there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I didn't read reviews, but that is how I feel. And outside of that final thought, I enjoyed reading it. I feel very conflicted about it. I do think it was an interesting story. I don't know how to rate it on Goodreads.
No, I have no idea.
I don't know what to say. And I feel like if I read the other novels, or at least the second one, it'll be a long time from now. So that's where I'm at.
Nice. Yeah, for my final thoughts, I thought it was a very compelling story. Again, I thought the tension that was built from the various storylines did truly explode in such a fantastic way. It said in a terrible context, if that makes any sense. Just in the fact that like a lot of these setups ended up coming back around in ways that were like somewhat unexpected, and even the ordering of how we like got resolutions that, you know, I thought that Ruth's baby was going to be something that caused such a rift for Rabbit's family, and no, it was Rabbit leaving again, and it was like his constant talking about Janice's alcoholism that got her to drink more in the first place. Like all these things were so interesting in the way that they were told, in the order that they were told, that I thought it was like something that I was flying through, especially at the end. So I can appreciate it for that. Echoing what Jamie had said, what Danny had said, you know, there are especially, and this is something I keep coming back to because like I do have a lot of complimentary things to say for this book and for this writing, but the way that Updike has Rabbit describe women, I think, is so telling. With the way that he's able to describe so many other things is such a telling thing for his own perception on women and the way that they're written. I thought that there were some instances that the women were written in such a way that was satisfying, and they were able to address Rabbit and his problems in a good way. But overall, that was the biggest problem, is like, how much do you have to have this character talk about how women look? How much do you have to revisit these themes that you are so adequately able to touch on with such a, you know, so lightly elsewhere? Why do you have to do it so heavily here? And that's a problematic thing. And so, you know, for that reason, you know, it is a tough read to continue to revisit, but I would want to read the rest of it because I think that it was critical of a lot of important things, and especially in regards to it being focusing on different time periods, decades at a time, when we do get into the civil rights movement between here and the next book, another wave of the feminist movement between now and the next book. Like, there's a lot of things that I think would help improve that perspective, that if we're still able to get this commentary on what I saw is like a lot of it, not on just the human condition, but on like American life specifically at this time. I think that like a lot of that was compelling enough for me. Like even the subtle jabs at capitalism and like commercialism at the beginning were like compelling to me, even though they were only visited briefly. I'm hoping that like those movements are able to make it into a more well-rounded read. And I will say, like on Goodreads, as we talked about, I think on the last episode, the ratings only go up maybe it's the survivor's bias, the thing that we had like semi talked about last time, but also the last two books of this series, not the novella, the last two of the series were the ones that got the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. So it's not even the next one, it's the next two after that. So I find that to be
I thought
the third.
I thought the first.
The third and the fourth were the ones that got the Pulitzer Prize from what I understand.
Oh, I thought it was Rabbit. I thought Rabbit Run won the Pulitzer Prize.
Well, shit, I'm gonna have to look that up real quick.
Let's do it. That's fine, baby. Do some quick. We're gonna do a quick Google. We'll be right back after these messages.
Quick Google. But regardless, I thought that overall it was definitely something I was glad to have read, and it ended more satisfyingly than I was thinking that it even would. When we first started, I thought that this was going to be a shit show. I thought that there was not going to be like these redeeming things at all. I thought it was just like, oh, this is questionable if we're going to come around to some meaning commentary on anything.
It's the last two that won the Pulitzer Prize.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, shit.
So that is kind of interesting to me and compelling enough for me as well. So I think those are kind of my final thoughts, that like I am still interested in the journey of Rabbit now that I have more of an idea that we are critical of him. Again, maybe not all of the things of him that we should be critical of, the royal we as in how Updike writes him, but like there is enough critical aspects of Rabbit that it would be interesting to revisit in the future. So I think those are my final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I feel like the only like, I don't know. I would like to read the next one too. That's all I have to say.
Maybe next season on the pod.
We'll do a sequel.
I have heard, just as like a brief thing, that a lot of people think the second one is maybe the worst one.
Nice.
But regardless. So with that, we have now finished our third book of the second season. So all of us have had a choice. Danny, that was quite
the choice.
Bold choice. Fostered some very interesting discussion.
In part, blame the book mug. In part.
Yeah, the book mug strikes again. So, as we had mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we are going to have a guest for the next two episodes. Special mystery guest.
Special.
So we will be back with that. The book, it was basically how it had happened. We had talked about a different way it had happened for the fourth book of the season last time, where it was kind of a committee vote. So essentially this guest presented a list of books to us, and then we discussed amongst ourselves, and we ended up coming up with Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. Is that how you'd pronounce that?
I would say
it's
Hesse.
German, so I
Yeah.
don't know if there's
No one knows for sure.
but
No one knows, actually.
no one knows. So it is Steppenwolf. That will be the first half for the next episode with our special guest on another quarantine edition of Beer Time with Books.
Do you already have a copy?
We do.
Oh yeah, we Amazoned it.
I don't have to. Shit.
Not
I don't have to.
Spawn.
Well, I guess I don't. I don't. I don't have to race you to Prospero's now. I'm gonna call Prospero's tomorrow.
Yeah, I think our guest has it as well. So with that, I don't even know who scattered last time.
It was me.
It was Danny. I think I scattered the one before that, so I think that leaves us on a nice scat with Jamie.
A squeedly doo bop, a shootily zoop, a loobity doop dop, a boobity dop.
So classic. Such a classic scat. I need to supercut all of Jamie's scats together just to prove this point. So we will catch you next time.
Bye.